Welcome to World Builders Anonymous. Kick that world building addiction and actually finish that novel with your hosts Vito and John.
Recording.
Oh man,
we can just have you talking.
Yeah, have me talking to nothing. That was so funny, but Johnny wasn't recording.
Oh, it's
So sad.
like Irish music. Okay.
Anyway, speaking of Irish music, yeah.
Oh, there we are again.
Welcome to the podcast.
Welcome to the podcast.
Maybe I'll make that a tradition every week. No, not really. This week, though, we are celebrating over 1,000 total downloads since last week. Not since last week, since we started.
Whoa.
That would be crazy.
Whoa, slow down.
So that's pretty cool. Thank you guys so much for listening and tuning in with us. Now I'm going to drink this beer while Johnny says something about that.
Oh, yeah, on the spot.
Too late.
We did great while you were gone.
Just
now
now.
it's done. Okay. Yeah, it was great. I am John. This is my co-host Vito, and we are happy you are here. It's going to be a bit of a different show today. A little bit shorter, maybe a little bit. There's not an article associated with it. We're not doing one of our sort of everything you need to know for your first draft episodes that we've been doing lately. We're going to chill out a little bit.
Yeah,
it's been a bit of a stressful week.
I'm nursing a broken finger right now after a weekend of calamity and violence.
Now, Vito, when you're a violinist, you don't want to break your fingers, right?
That is a bad thing when that happens.
Right.
It fortunately is on my bowing hand, which is not that very important. If I needed to, I could just tape my bow to my wrist and play that way. If I really needed to.
I was really hoping you were going to say, if I really wanted to, I could just cut it off and then play with 4 fingers instead of 5, but it's fine.
Well, you know how in pirate movies they often have very creative hook hand alternatives, like in Captain Hook. He has all his different hook hands. So, one of them should be just attached to a bow at all times, just slip it on.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
I fetch my best dress hook.
But yes, anyway. It's been a weird week. So we did not have as much prepped as we would like. But we're gonna kind of talk about some kind of big picture stuff today, and also go over some listener questions which we have gotten this past week, as well as our Reddit question for this week, and just kind of
we actually have.
Yeah, we actually
have
one.
The first time in 3 weeks. So I mean, gotta give myself a little bit of a pat on the back for putting
for
30 seconds of effort in.
Give yourself a pat on the back for sufficiency.
Yes, for adequacy. Yeah. So. A couple pertinent topics for the day, including sort of an update of our mission statement, so to speak. We've been taking not a break from our main goal, but sort of just another path to take with these articles we've been writing and stuff like that. But today we're going to kind of reaffirm what we've been up to, talk about quote unquote burnout, whether that's a thing, and how to avoid it, as well as kind of just talking about the progress we've made in these first couple months. But first, I'm going to pretend that I have this on paper. Now I'm going to look at my right monitor. We received a message from a fellow by the name of Josh Kearns. 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 I hope that's the right way to pronounce it. It sounds right.
You just do it with an accent. Cairns.
Josh Kearns.
Yes.
Josh Kearns.
Shouldn't make too much fun of Irish people. We just had our first Irish downloads.
Josh Kearns. Yeah. Got me off track. I will just go ahead and read it. Hey guys, I started building a world earlier this year on a whim. I was almost 50,000 words into another book I'd started writing. I got pulled into the realms of high fantasy. I don't remember what caused it, but my writing had been stagnating, and I eagerly jumped at the chance to get my creative juices flowing again. So here I am, lots of lore written, and only about 10,000 or so words of the actual story done, and I've already got 3.5 pages of notes on different stories in the same world. Plans for both sequels in the trilogy I'm currently writing, rough plans for a second trilogy that occurs concurrently with the first trilogy, but does not overlap, 2 short stories, and now a 3rd series that involves discovery of a new continent. Whew.
Wow.
Any advice on how to keep my attention on the original story at hand? I've got a bunch of notes organized into a sequence of events. I just have to actually write it. First of all, that is a ton to be thinking about at once.
Oh my gosh.
Holy crap.
That's insane.
Now, I've kind of had that going on before. The book I'm working on right now actually kind of was thought to potentially be a trilogy at some point because there was originally a much greater, I guess, time period the novel took place over. I ended up just cutting out the first 2 books and making those into backstory. Just jumped into the third one. If it was a trilogy, it would be the third one. Now it's the only one. But yeah, this is exactly what kind of prompted us to make our podcast in the first place. Just this idea that there's so much out there to think about. There's so much you could do. Like wow, my words are terrible. The attraction of writing. I don't even drink and I can't speak. One of the big attractions of writing is that it's literally a blank page and you can do whatever you want with it. And that's great. And it's one of the best parts of, trying to be an author. But the downside is that you can do anything you want. And that means you can decide not to write and instead
and there's no
plan out 9 novels.
And there's no automatic limitations. Like you could go off in one direction for infinity, like if you're in space, you just drift off one way forever and never get on another course because you could just take that course for, the rest of your life basically. And it's kind of like that where if you don't give yourself your own boundaries within which to work, you're going to go off in a million different directions and never focus on one thing enough to actually finish one. And that's exactly why we started this podcast, because we both experienced that at various times in trying to write stuff. And this is our attempt to kind of codify a method maybe, or several methods that work for different people, who knows, of just trying to focus and give yourself those boundaries, the right boundaries, that give you enough space to create and world build enough to create something interesting, but also, enough confines to actually finish something, especially first draft, and then go back and do more. That's kind of at least what we're thinking so far. But it's all about giving yourself those boundaries that you need to not go off into infinity.
Yeah. So here's a thought. So his actual question and all of that was, do you have any advice on how to keep your attention on the original story at hand? And one thing that makes me think of is if we're continually coming up with new things that are not what we're currently writing, do you think that could be at least a sign that we're not that interested in what we're actually writing at the time? We feel the need to branch out and think of other things?
I mean, it's kind of a cop-out answer, but it really depends. To a certain degree, you're not going to have the same level of interest in a story all the way through. I think we're both experiencing that right now, even with the stories we're writing, in that our momentum has kind of stalled a little bit. And not necessarily just because we've lost interest in the story. There's time constraints and that kind of stuff too. But that's going to happen no matter what you're doing. So there's always going to be a certain amount of keeping yourself on track, even though you're not feeling it at the time, kind of thing. But at the same time, maybe that is an indication that maybe this is something to put away for a while and work on something else. I don't know. I know some people like to have 2 stories going on all the time. Like when one kind of grinds to a halt, they'll work on the other one. And then when that grinds to a halt, go back to the other one. Yeah, that'd be tough for me too. I don't know. Maybe I'll try that sometime. But what was your question again?
That's kind of what we did, though, is we were doing this continually with our story ideas. And then when we started this project, we said, okay, we're throwing all that out. We're starting with something new, and we're going to stick to that.
Exactly. That's
that was kind of the momentum shift for us, was saying, okay, we're struggling with these ideas, and they're not really interesting us enough to stick with them, so we're going to shelve them and find something new that we're passionate about and want to write, and then we're going to write that.
Yeah, and trying to just grit our way through it, even if it gets hard and we're kind of tired of it a little bit. Just trying to make ourselves finish something.
Yeah, and I think one of the biggest things for me to kind of enabled me to stick with this story and be able to focus on it was when we did the 27-chapter outline. That was such a big change for me, because then for the first time I could see the story beginning to end and get excited about it. And it wasn't an abstract idea of, I know I want my characters to be here at some point. I want them to meet this person. I want them to participate in this event or the other. I don't have any sort of mental problems. I'm just not good at speaking. I promise. Well, I haven't gotten tested, but whatever. Anyway, when we did that outline, the 27 beat, I should say, outline, I was able to get more excited about this story. And since then, I haven't really felt the urge to world build a different story. I've had to keep some of the world building for my own story at bay sometimes. But for the most part, I've been able to focus more so on this one thing. So
yeah,
that's one thing.
You guys should definitely go back and listen to the first few episodes in which we worked on our outlines too, if that's something that interests you.
From like raw idea to finding
because it was very helpful for sure in again giving us those boundaries within which to work, because we're saying, this is the story we're going to write, and this is kind of a rough outline of it. Here's the parameters we're going to be working in, and here we go, kind of thing.
Right. And as Josh here is saying, he says he has a bunch of notes organized into a sequence of events, and I thought that was good enough. But when we actually went to do the outline, I discovered 50 new things about my story that I didn't have. I didn't realize how much depth I needed to actually know about in advance.
Yeah.
And so that's the first bit of advice, or I don't know if it's the first. We've said like 4 things, but that's one of the big things of advice I would say is to find a story that, like, pick one of your stories that you're thinking about and the one that makes you most excited, and then do it right and make an outline, plot it out, figure out where you want it to go. And odds are, if it's a story you really like and you like where it's going, you like the characters, you're going to want to see that world and that story filled in.
And the thing is, too, like, even if you have ideas for a trilogy, oftentimes just plotting out the trilogy isn't enough. Like, you really need to write that first book in order to really know how the other 2 books are probably going to go, for the most part. At least I would, because there's so much that I'm discovering as I'm writing, even though I have an outline, so I
it's
can't
like too far
imagine,
ahead to project.
Yeah, it's so far in the future. I mean, you can have like some big events, a rough, sequence of events for the other novels, but I wouldn't spend a ton of time deciding the color of the dragon's scales that's going to take off the princess in the second book, at the climax of the whatever, because that's going to be way in the future, and it's going to depend on all these variables you haven't even put on paper yet. So that seems to me like something that should be saved for after you've actually at least written a first draft of the first book. Yeah.
I sometimes wonder, like, with long series like Harry Potter, I wonder how different the 7th book is from J.K. Rowling's original idea, or where the story would go, or if she even thought it was going to go that far. Yeah. I wonder if it's like, for me, I feel like if I wrote a book and didn't plan on writing a sequel, but it was like a smash success, I'd have to go like, okay, I guess I have to figure out what happens next. I hope I don't screw it up.
That sounds like a real big pain in the butt, man. Gee whiz. I mean, it's definitely, I think it's good to like anticipate, especially with, the publishing industry being the way it is, anticipate that you'll want to have more books in a series for the most part, because usually it seems like most things are in series. So if you're writing any book, it's probably good to at least consider the implications of what happens in this book, what that might have going forward for the character, and plan some sort of long-term arc for them, at least roughly. But at the same time, like, if you never actually write that first book, you're screwed.
Anthony Ryan did it in an interesting way when he wrote Blood Song, which was by far the best book of his series, the first one, Blood Song. But in the second book, the main character of the first one wasn't really the main character anymore. Like, he kind of focused in on a different character.
Was it like the same time period, or was it afterwards, or
same time period? And the main character from the first one was a character in the second book, and he was still a major player, but he wasn't like the perspective character most of the time.
I see, yeah.
And that was an interesting way of solving it. It's like, we're kind of leaving this guy's story a little bit behind, but we're still in the world, and we can tell a different story that's in sort of a different part of the world.
That's risky, yeah.
And that it is, and that's one of the reasons I didn't like it so much, because I really liked the main character.
Exactly. Like, if you wrote a book good enough that people really loved, they might not like switching perspective characters like that in the second book, unless you really earn it. I mean, that's possible to do.
Yeah, and the romance in that book was weird too. Well, maybe I shouldn't spoil it. Basically, I guess it doesn't really matter. Valen falls in love with a person.
Well, I might still read it.
Well, it doesn't matter because it goes nowhere.
Okay,
he falls in love with a person, and it's like the romantic relationship sort of culminates at the end, and they actually get to be together. And then she's just not even a part of the story in the second book, and in the third book he finds a new person to be in love with. It just doesn't come out
that makes me
anything.
not even want to pick it up, because
I know it was really obnoxious, because I got invested. I'm like, oh, this is kind of cool, and then it just wasn't anymore.
I mean, we're getting off on a tangent here, I guess, but real quick, the romance part of any book is usually the most engaging part for me, like in a weird way. Like that, I would literally, when I was reading Aragon, I would literally like look forward, flip forward in the book to the next chapter that had Aragon and Arya together, and I would be like,
their dynamic was good.
I didn't actually like read it, but I was just like, how much farther do I have to get through before you have another chapter with these people, that kind of thing,
Yeah.
So yeah,
it can be super engaging, but that makes it all the more punishing when it kind of
just fizzles
lets you down.
Exactly, yeah.
Like the end of Aragon, for example.
Right,
the end of the last Aragon book.
It's a real bummer, yeah. That's one of the reasons I love the Star Wars books so much, because you had like Luke and Mara Jade's the relationship, that they meet and they hate each other, and then as time goes on, they like encounter each other over and over again, and then like it's like 10 or 14 books later that they actually like have their actual bonding moment. Where they kind of fall in love, but like you've seen their whole story up until that point, and then just the long term that romance that goes on in those books is actually really engaging. And if imagine if it's just like in whatever the Timothy Zahn book where they actually like fall in love, if they're like she just disappeared and there's just like
right,
well,
like, we're not gonna
it was nothing cool.
She's gone.
Anyway,
yeah, Vito may look big and tough on the outside, but in the inside, he's the big softy who likes romance novels.
It's pretty true. Not romance novels, but like romance in
other
novels.
I volunteered a couple of years during college, during the semester. I volunteered shelving books at a library, and I sometimes would have to shelve like the paperback romance novel section. And man, it's some weird stuff.
Oh boy.
Every single cover is just like an oiled up shirtless guy with giant pecs and these like 10-pack abs with like a button up shirt that's hanging open.
Yep. I believe,
and like a woman's hand on his chest. It's like that's the motif right there.
Oh boy. Anyway,
it's great.
We should probably get back on track.
It's Vito's favorite books. Those ones.
No. Anyway,
that was a long stumble. Anyway, so let's transition this a little bit into talking about where we're at. A couple months into the project, as it were.
Although did we give
on?
our boy Joe or whatever his name is?
Our boy Josh. Oh, jeez.
Do you mind if I call you Joe? I mean, it's short for Josh. There you go.
Can I call you Joe? Yeah. So to sum up our ramble, focus in on one of your stories. Find the one that gets you excited. Plot it out.
Preferably the first one.
Preferably, but I mean, in my case, I didn't start with the first book and sort of the trilogy I decided on. I found a way to condense it all into the third one, and then that's where I wanted to start, because that's when I felt like the story was going to be the most interesting.
Oh, okay.
And the most engaging for me to write.
And then you basically find where prequels from there.
Prequels, or to me, it's just backstory, which I could write out later, I guess.
Yeah.
But yeah, so find not just the world that you want to be in, but find the story that gets you excited. You don't have to use the 27-beat outline, but outline it somehow, beginning to end, so you see where your story is and where it's going. Yeah. In some detail, yeah. Don't have it. They go here, and then he fights the Goblin King, and then he kills the Goblin King, and then he becomes the Goblin King.
Plot twist.
Plot twist. He is now a goblin. Critical failure. You are a goblin.
You rolled a 1. Yeah.
I imagine that's what Dungeons and Dragons is like. Having never played it.
Oh, boy.
But find the story you like, plot it, and then understand that without the story, your world will never be experienced or appreciated by anyone.
Yeah, and
the story has to be the thing that drives a reader through your world that you've worked so hard on. And so you should really focus on making the story great and actually having a story, and then you can really dress it up with the world building.
That's a good way to put it. Like, the story is what's going to show off your world, and if you don't have a strong story, and by story we don't mean necessarily just the sequence of events. We also mean strong characters, that people care about and empathize with, and a compelling journey they go on, regardless of what the setting is, what the world looks like, what the magic is like, all that kind of stuff. That's all great. But without that core of a great story, you're not going to have anybody interested in the world you create anyway. So definitely focus on the story first. Maybe even write it out before you have all the details. That's what we're doing right now.
Right.
We're trying to write a compelling story with compelling characters, and then color it later with more world building. So yeah, some is necessary up front, but 10,000 words.
Just to understand the world you're in. Yeah.
I mean, it's cool. Some of that works for people too, but man, then you become Patrick Rothfuss, writing a book for 7 years while everyone's like, come on, man.
What is the year counter on that? Is it to 8 years yet?
I don't know. It might be.
It might be.
Or George R.R. Martin. Yeah. So that can work for some people, but it's definitely less productive.
Yes. And then the second piece of advice is sort of the transition period to what we want to talk about for ourselves, and that's making time to write. Because that's an important step to this. It's great to have an outline. It's great to know what you want to write about, but you actually have to do it.
Yeah, and let's throw in a dash of keeping yourself actually writing productively when you do sit down to write.
Yes. Oh, I thought you were going to expand on that.
No, definitely not. I'm going to drink the swig of beer.
Oh, I have to fill time again. Oh gosh.
No, I was quick. I'm already done.
Hey everybody.
He picks up his guitar, just like he starts playing. Oh my gosh, I knew we were going to.
Does that work? Oh gosh. Sorry. Thank goodness my guitar is in open C right now. Yeah. So, as you may have noticed, we've begun the last few shows by saying, I had a pretty slow week of writing. And that's because, for me, it's largely because I've just been not necessarily even burned out on my story or the writing of it. It's just that I haven't been making enough time to write, which is understandable. We both are not, we're not able to be full-time writers or anything like that. But I'm noticing there's time that I could be writing when I'm kind of choosing not to, and I need to kind of limit that as much as I can if I want to make some real progress.
Right.
Overall, though, sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say the same thing for me. I mean, yeah, we're busy. We both have all the other jobs that we do and that kind of stuff, and for me, especially this weekend has been pretty insane, just with the events that transpired. But in general, it's kind of a cop-out to just say, I'm busy, I don't have time. You have time for whatever you make time for.
Right.
And I think part of being productive with anything, whether it's writing or anything you want to do, is not letting distractions happen to you or downtime just happen to you, but making it happen for yourself. And it's fine to have some downtime and kind of not write if every once in a while and that kind of thing, but just own that decision to either do it or not do it, and really decide if you want to get this thing done, decide to do it, and make the time to do it. And neither one of us have been doing that in the last couple of weeks, and I think part of it is because of just kind of frustration with writing. I mean, it's hard. I know I'm at a point in the story where I'm losing momentum a little bit, and I don't know exactly what's going to happen, and it's hard. I'm trying a couple different things, and nothing seems to fit with what I want, and I know it's not good or whatever it is. I'll sit down and write, 2 paragraphs, and then just like sit and look at the screen and try to think of what's happening right now, and blanking out. But let it suck. I had some pretty good success the other day, jumping to a completely different scene that I hadn't even anticipated writing, but I just had a little, spark of an idea, and I went and did it, and I only got, half a page worth done because I didn't have much time, but I'm going to keep working on that one. But let yourself jump around, let yourself kind of flow into whatever's kind of seems to be kind of flowing a little bit, Don't just sit there doing nothing, just write words, even if they're not good, because they're not going to be good. It's a first draft. Who cares?
Yeah, I mean, it'd be better even to, I think, kind of, if you have nothing happening and you just can't make it happen, I think it'd be better to even go and do some world building and type out some thoughts just to kind of keep yourself immersed and be productive in some way.
Maybe.
Than to just be unable to do anything. Maybe that can be a sort of break.
But that can become a habit, though. That can become a habit.
That's true.
That, whenever things get hard, you just kind of revert back to, whenever he casts this spell, this thing happens or whatever, kind of thing. Or whatever it is, and that can be productive if it's, supporting the story. But during the first draft process, that really needs to be something you really limit to only the most essential stuff. And it's hard to know what that is, to be fair. I certainly don't know exactly what that is for my story completely yet either. But just be aware that can be a real bad habit that can cripple your progress for sure.
Sure. yeah, so as overall though, I guess I'll go ahead and start. A couple months into this, I'm fairly pleased with the progress I've made. As we've stated before, for me, it's the furthest I've gotten into a story, writing wise.
That by itself is pretty big success.
Yeah, I mean, it's the most success I've had thus far, so it's got to be something. I think given how quickly I started, I think I should have been able to get a little more done by now. But that goes back to the thing that
right.
Haven't made enough time for it. I'm gonna get back on it. But overall, I'm pretty pleased with it. I'm excited to see where my story goes. I'm dealing with kind of a period of transition, sort of in my story right now, where I'm going from one sort of setting to another. And that's kind of slowing me down because I just got some momentum here. I know I got to switch to somewhere else and more stuff. Got a new set of things to reestablish, essentially. So it slows down my thought process a little bit, but I'm getting there. How do you feel about your progress thus far?
I feel pretty good about it. It's not been the favorite story I've worked on so far out of all the ideas I've ever had. I still like it a lot, and I still want to keep developing this one. I see a lot of potential in it, but I haven't quite realized that potential yet. But again, it's just the first draft. It's not what it's going to be eventually, even if I finish the whole thing right now. Right. I definitely want to keep going with it. I've gotten pretty far. I've been able to do better than most attempts I've had in the past, especially since some of my first ones where I got 250 pages into a story before stopping, and I've been able to kind of set aside some of my perfectionism and kind of knowledge of how things should be now. And like we've talked about before, the more you know, the more you can kind of paralyze yourself with your own lack of expertise in a practical sense. Like, you know how a story should go, you know how a story should be constructed, but you haven't practiced it enough to actually be able to execute that yet. And so we're still working through that process of, just executing the knowledge that we've kind of accumulated just through reading and watching lectures and that kind of stuff. And that's okay. That's a process that you have to go through.
Yeah. Do you feel good to transition to the Reddit question this week?
Yeah, let's go ahead and do that. Yeah.
Thank you, Josh Cairns, for the question. We appreciate it.
Still going to call you Joe.
Thanks, Joe, for the question.
Joe Cairns, yeah.
Alrighty. So I'm announcing today a bit of a change to the format of the Reddit question because it is losing its Reddit exclusivity. Woo! Yay!
I wish I had another beer to crack.
You've had too many. You got to numb the pain in your finger.
That is true.
So from now on, when we do Reddit questions, I'm going to announce the Reddit question for the new week at the end of the podcast. And now, because you'll know it from the podcast, you can email us, message us on Instagram, Twitter, or Facebook. Anything you can find us on, you can message us your answers, and if you do that, you will have a greater chance to end up being shouted out on the show, and by name, because I don't know anyone's name on Reddit, because everyone has names like Project Moon Province, which is not helpful as far as recognition goes. So if you message us an answer to the question every week, you have a good chance to be shouted out and named on the show. With all of that said, we didn't do that this past week because it's just a regular old Reddit question. And that question is, what are some creative twists on standard world-building tropes? So I'm talking things like the tall, slender, archery-inclined elves who are very graceful and very subdued, and your grumpy dwarves who are drunk and Scottish. The skeptical hero, very strictly elemental magic systems, with no deviation from that. Kind of some standard things that you find in fantasy worlds, and what are some ways to kind of spice them up? And as usual with the Reddit questions, the answers range everywhere from, oh, that makes sense, to, oh gosh, you need help.
There's some weird people out there.
There's some weird people. Here's one I thought was really cool. And it goes with the whole idea that the limitations on a magic system are at least as or more interesting than the actual magic system itself. And this one is, the elemental system is bound to seasons. No one can practice magic all the time. You have an affinity with one season, which dictates which powers you have. And then you can only use those powers during the season in which that correlates to your powers. So he didn't name this example, but say summer makes sense to be fire powers. You can only use those fire powers during the summertime. In the winter, you're not dominant. And this would seem
or
to
at least
lead
they're
to
weaker
sort of,
or something, yeah.
Weaker maybe. This seems like it would lead to, like, it would have to lead to sort of a shifting leadership, sort of, because whoever has the power at the time is going to be in charge.
Unless there was some sort of unified body of elemental magic users who, kind of share authority.
But then there's always the temptation when it's your season to join together with your magic people and like take over. There's always that.
But if you do anything bad to the other guys, they're going to do something bad to you.
Not if you crush them hard enough. If you take them out completely, there's always someone. There's always that one guy, and that one guy is me.
Well, that's the great thing too. There could be different organizations that would kind of do different things because people are different in different cultures and in places. But yeah, that's an interesting idea that lends itself very interestingly to an elemental magic system. It could even be tied to things like the moon and things that are in real life tied to the seasons and that kind of stuff, and that could be part of some sort of religion and all kinds of cool stuff. That's interesting.
I like it. Another person said, talking about mages and elemental magic stuff, this guy says, my mages are pretty much, well, he doesn't say it explicitly, but it seems like he's, excuse me, gosh, my heart is dying.
Well, that's not good.
No, I'm fine. His mages seem to have maybe a little more subdued magical abilities, but they are also like actual combatants. They wield physical weapons, and they'll fight you while they shoot magic at you, and they're equally good at both. I like a sort of a battle mage sort of idea.
I like a good limited magic system that's very subtle. Like your powers are very kind of small. In a certain sense, like you can only do very limited things with it, and you have to be creative in how you use it. I think we talked about that a little bit before, I think, but
yeah. I liked in Aragon the human magicians, like mostly had to be kind of regular people who had some magical ability, and so they had to kind of be able to fight as well, like the ones in the Varden and everything. Mm-hmm. I thought that was pretty cool. It's kind of along that line.
The system itself in Aragon is pretty overpowered. Like you could literally kill armies with a thought,
Yeah, like I'm just gonna pinch all your brain stems.
Exactly.
Off. Yeah. How do they know about brain stems?
No, it was like the capillaries inside your brain or something like that.
How do they know about capillaries? This is 200 AD. What's going on? He says he also has elves, but they are short and bug-like.
Short and bug-like?
You can, think of what that means for yourself.
I'm just thinking of like a really cute, like big-eyed, tiny little elf.
Oh, cool.
Exactly. Oh, gosh.
I'm an elf. Hello. It makes me think of like the goblins from Lord of the Rings who are like climbing on the walls.
A little bit, yeah.
That's what I think.
That is an interesting take on elves. If elves are like basically what goblins are in Lord of the Rings.
Well, it's like in they were once elves.
Yeah, that's true.
But in the Battle for Westnoth, there were like underground elves, and they had like darker, like this kind of coal colored skin, and they had like red eyes and stuff.
Although dark elves like that are pretty common in fantasy.
Well, you know what? I just had a thought, and you kind of just have to go with it.
Well, to be fair, neither one of us are that familiar with like classic fantasy.
I think it's a thing in like World of Warcraft
and
too,
like Dungeons and Dragons lore and that kind of stuff, and like R.A. Salvatore and that kind of stuff.
Yeah. So speaking of elves, let's get weird. So
let's get
here's
weird
some elves. They're not conventional, but and elves aren't the conventional being, wise and mystical species. He says, I suppose you could call them twists on tropes. And oh boy, how twisted does it get? They hate magic. They are descended from an ancient feral vampiric species that resembled bats.
Okay.
So
vampires.
That's where we're coming from here. Yeah, well, you could... Vito, what's the difference between a feral vampiric species that resemble bats and vampires? It's a big difference. You need to understand it. When they consume blood, they can wield great magic, but it corrupts them and twists them back to their primal state.
Interesting.
Too much consumption causes insanity and permanent reversion, which is not a word, I don't think, to their ancient forms.
I don't think it's a word.
Perversion? Maybe it is. This is awkward.
But that's a good question, though. Like, at what point do you basically just call it something else? You know, if it's that dissimilar to what elves are typically like understood to be, like why even call them elves? You know,
yeah,
because to a certain extent, like you use that to give the audience or reader some idea of what they're dealing with, like some built-in kind of like backstory almost. Because if you have elves in your story and they kind of look and feel like, you know, Lord of the Rings elves, like that tells them something about the story. But and it could be cool to like have this like subversion of expectations, you know, be like,
yeah, it's sort of bait and switch.
Yeah,
almost.
I have elves, but they're different, kind of thing.
But they're feral vampiric species that used to resemble bats, but now they don't for some reason.
So yeah,
they're
that's
also
a question
very
you have to ask yourself for sure.
Yeah, they're very warlike. They're also big on slavery, which you know, there's. You know, who isn't?
And that's another thing too, though, to think about too, which is like making an entire like, I guess race is the only really word for it. Like an entire race of beings, whether it's like dark elves or you know orcs or something like that, or Urgles in Aragon. Although that's a little more complicated than that. But making an entire race of beings basically one way for the most part is not only sort of inaccurate in the real world, but also just kind of less complex than it could be, you know. And it seems like oftentimes like the evil species is like has one culture and like one sort of way of thinking, and no matter where they're from. And I don't know. It seems like a pretty bad trope in fantasy. Not only like. I'm not even talking societally. I'm just, you know, even from a storytelling perspective, because that's not as interesting as a varied kind of, you know, species is. Just like humans, we're a very varied bunch, you know.
Yeah. So we'll end on this one, and this is sort of an example to me of when you go too far. You take a world building thing and then you make it something that makes me go, as a nerd, what is happening? It's like reading a textbook. So this is this guy's magic system.
Oh boy. And
I don't mean to be insulting. It's clear that you put a lot of work into this, but I don't know what you're talking about. So the false force, aka the preternatural force, or common name Mira force.
Oh boy.
Is a force inherent to the Maelstrom throne and its solar system. The force expresses itself in the form of miraton particles. What are miraton particles, you ask? Well, I'll tell you. They replace electron. The miraton particles replace electrons in an action similar to electron capture. This creates a mira atom, a generally stable atom. The occurrences of this process only occur under certain conditions. Mira hydrogen, for example, occurs at negative 128 Celsius. These Mira atoms can form molecular bonds with both normal atoms and Mira atoms. These bonds form one of two things, and it goes on to explain what those things are. But I don't know what's happening.
Wow, that's pretty.
It may be that I'm not smart. But this is an interesting point, though, because if I understood this, it might be super cool, right?
Right.
But this kind of thing, you cannot expect a reader to understand. And that by itself will not... In the context of your novel.
Right, and that by itself will not make your story interesting, and people want to read it.
Right.
For the most part. Like
I think of kind of...
Oh, go ahead.
When I think of interesting magic systems, I think of Aragon, right? Your abilities are tied directly to your strength, and so finding ways to accomplish a task with the least physical strength necessary makes you more effective. That's easy to grasp and understand. Cool. In like The Name of the Wind, it sort of follows the laws of thermodynamics, and that's getting kind of scientific, but it's well explained. Basically, you can't break those laws, and they're easy to understand and lay out. Simple, easy to digest. When you start to get into like molecular bonding and replacing electrons and like nuclear fission or whatever's going on, that's just it doesn't make someone want to understand what's happening.
Yeah, and who knows, that story could be written in such a way where, it's explained in a very sort of organic way, and you just kind of get it. But yeah, that seems pretty excessive. But who knows, So yeah, go ahead and answer our Reddit questions. We'll make fun of you on the show. It'll be great.
Yes, and so yeah, I don't mean to make fun, but yeah, I kind of just did, and I'm sorry. I will put myself in the punishment box, which is what I call my closet. So yeah, that's this week's Reddit.
Is it what your wife calls your closet?
Well, that's what I call it when she puts me in it.
I was going to say when she puts you in it. Yeah, exactly.
No.
Get in the punishment box.
Get in the punishment box.
Exactly
my wife's not
what
British.
She sounds like.
No. Sorry, babe.
Yeah, that's the biggest problem with that impression. Yeah, that she was British.
Yeah, no, that's exactly what it was. Sorry, you guys had to go through that. This next week's Reddit question / email us your response question is: have you experienced burnout in terms of writing your novels? Have you experienced this sort of halting loss of momentum that we're going through a little bit? And what did you do to fix it? And we love to hear your stories as well. Like, and I don't mean your books. That's not what I mean by stories in this particular instance. Although we would like to hear about those too. In this particular instance, I mean, what the problem you encountered was, why you sort of started to lose interest, and what you did to overcome it. That's what we'd like to know. Email us at wbapodcast@gmail.com. Find us on Facebook, Twitter, and or Instagram at World Builders Anonymous. You can message us on any of those platforms, and we will receive your message. And if we like what you say, we will read your response on the podcast.
In a positive
as well as on
or
Reddit.
A negative way. Who knows?
Sure. I mean, trash talk us. I think it'd be pretty fun.
Yeah.
Yeah, and also it will be on Reddit. This one will probably be on the Fantasy Writers subreddit. So look for it there if you want to respond on there. But you know what? If you message us directly, we'll probably be more likely to read your response and put it on the show.
Yeah, definitely. Cool. Awesome. Anything else to add today, John?
You can find our website, www.worldbuildersanonymous. There, all of our podcasts as well as our bios are up there, as well as our series on everything you need to know to write your first draft and / world building tips. Those are articles you can read on our website. We'll probably be doing another one of those quite soon, probably next week.
Yeah. Because of the circumstances, we didn't get one out this week, but we're going to continue that starting next week, hopefully. Hopefully I'm able to type by then, but we'll see.
Sad
I'll figure something
finger.
out, yeah. Also, I wanted to mention we've had a couple people message us who are in the middle of kind of researching certain topics. I think somebody emailed us or messaged us this week who is very interested in ethics and philosophy as it relates to forms of government and how that can be integrated in world building and that kind of stuff. We are wanting to have some people on the podcast at some point. So if you're particularly knowledgeable about anything in particular like that, send us a message. Maybe we could even collaborate and talk together on the podcast sometime and have some fun conversations about that. So we're open to that sort of thing. Not necessarily, but we're open to it.
Yeah, and if you've done a lot of work on some kind of researching and have some writing and stuff, and you would like to potentially contribute to an article on our website, we'd probably be open to that as well.
Yeah, potentially, yeah. That'd be awesome. Cool.
Because we don't like doing work, so if you'll do the work for us, we'd appreciate that.
We'll pay you
and speaking
in
of
brownie points.
And iTunes reviews, which, by the way, is the accepted currency here at the World Builders Anonymous podcast. If you would like to show your appreciation for the show, subscribe and leave a review on iTunes and or Stitcher. iTunes seems to be the one that's more important, but you know what? Anything you do, we'll appreciate. But only do it if you're happy with the show and want to leave a positive review, because quite frankly, who goes to leave a negative review for a podcast? That's just, man, come on.
These guys
You're
smart.
better than
I don't
that.
like
You listening, you're better than that.
Oh boy.
You deserve better than that.
And so do we.
That was the motivational portion of the podcast,
Okay, cool.
by the way.
Good, yeah.
I hope you feel
Yeah,
inspired.
people are into that, man. People are into motivation.
You can do it. You can leave a positive review. I believe in you. Do you feel better? I feel better.
I feel better, yeah. Thanks, Tony Robbins.
I think we should end this
Okay,
before it goes more off the rails.
I know we said we were going to do a shorter podcast, but it'll end up being like 5 minutes shorter than our usual podcasts. Cool.
Consistently consistent? I don't know where that lies.
Well, I am all out of beer, which is our in
That's the cutoff.
Well, in my band, we often say like whenever we have like a beer while we're playing, like that's our set meter. Whenever the set meter runs out, we're done.
till the tankard's empty.
Exactly, yeah. So my set meter is empty right now, so we should probably go. Anyway, thank you guys for listening to the show. Like John said, leave us a review. Let us know what you're thinking. Respond to our question, and follow us on all our things. Cool, awesome. I think that's it. Okay, bye.
Bye.
This show is sponsored in part by Audible. Visit worldbuildersanonymous.com/audible to check out what the guys are listening to right now and to receive a free audiobook.